All right, letting some more people in, and then we'll get started around 1:02 p.m. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Elliot Bowers. I am one of the co-founders for Dispatch Gallery. We have been doing Dispatch Gallery since 2001. Our mission statement as Dispatch Gallery is an extension of the Unpacked Mobile Gallery as a remote option in Chicago originally. The mission is to call on international and domestic artists who work in video, audio, spoken word, and live performance. At Dispatch Gallery, we want to create a platform where artists can collaborate and showcase their work through performance, video, and film screening and artist interviews. Dispatch is an inclusive and diverse gallery bringing together artists with culturally and diverse identities, such as persons of color, LGBTQIAS2+, transgender and gender nonconforming, immigrants, women, and individuals who do not identify with the mainstream culture. Dispatch is committed to showcasing artists that are not able to perform in a brick and mortar gallery, and online platforms and collaboration will be the future of artists. So thank you so much for being here. I have the pleasure to introduce Giselle Mira-Diaz, exhibiting today the Rotten Fruit exhibition that is located at Columbia College, is a art research project that peels away at the surface to reveal the United Fruit Company's expansion into Central and South America. The work alludes to the complicated colonial history of those regions. Mira-Diaz utilizes archival materials to create a contemporary response combining photography, film, performance, and papermaking. Stuart Abelson's graduate research fellowship from Columbia College, Chicago, enabled Mira-Diaz to travel to Costa Rica and Colombia over the summer in 2023. I also have the pleasure to introduce Luis Benavides, and is a Latinx and queer photographer, moving image maker, and lecturer at Wilbur Wright College, City Colleges of Chicago. Working primarily with a range of personal archives, his work explores issues relating to gender, sexuality, culture, and migration. Thank you so much for both of you being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Thanks, Dispatch.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn off this camera and I'm going to be using my phone to do a walkthrough of the gallery. I know that Louise, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Elliot. We're going to have a Q&A and conversation.
Maybe while we're waiting, I'll just say that I know Giselle from and having programmed them a long time ago, like 2018, maybe 2017 we met, and we're going to talk a little bit about some connections between their past work and this work. But of course, you're going to get the tour of the space first. There's a lot of different materials being explored in the content, so I'll just let Giselle kind of explain that.
No, thank you. Absolutely. So yes, definitely a lot of materials. I think over the course of this project, I initially started with paper making that you can see some examples here. But I was walking towards the cyanotypes. I know that some folks have been able to see these in person. Some other folks, abroad or elsewhere have only been able to see it off of images online, and these were cyanotypes that were actually made of banana leaves in Costa Rica. Like Elliot mentioned, I was able to travel to Colombia and Costa Rica because of the Stuart Abelson research grant. And so here's another example of paper making. This is all made out of banana leaves. So if you look on the floor, those are examples of banana leaves, which I processed in order to turn into this paper. This is like a revealing portrait of an agricultural worker. Apologies if the camera on the phone is not as detailed. This is available on my website, Vimeo, where it's a performance piece where I am looking at the map of North and South Central America and the process of erasure, tracing the passages, the voyage of exporting fruit, exporting bananas up to America and Europe and abroad. And I'm erasing the countries from which United Fruit Company exploited and removed bananas from the land, and this very long and complicated history emerged. And so here are some examples. This is the east wall of the gallery. These are examples of collage with two things. So there's photographs that I took while I was in the space in Costa Rica and Colombia. There's also documents and maps and different things that I was able to find. For example, in this specific piece, this is a way that they carved out the land. United Fruit Company carved out the land in Limon, Costa Rica, which is the coast. And so you can see, you can see how there's different sections, right? So they're building the infrastructure for this, buying a lot of land for railroads to then transport the product out. There's some poetry, some of my own poetry, but I'm also looking at other poets in Latin American history that have also talked about this, like Neruda, Garcia Marquez, and so inserting some of their excerpts and their passages. Again, another example of a cyanotype, which I've done a digital rendition and collage. Another example of a analog, but also digital collage. Again, working with the same map. These are actual blueprints that I was able to see, and these two images that I just shown, that's coming from the National Archive, Archivo Nacional de Costa Rica in San Jose in the capital. I know, Luis, you also work with archives, so I feel like in some ways you've also inspired me to look at archives myself, right? Always been interested, but I know I've seen your body of work and I've seen how you utilize them. Again, another example. And another aspect throughout this body of work as well that I should mention is the gaze, right? We're so, well, if you're in these worlds, right? We think about the gaze, like who is the person who's presenting this kind of information. And a lot of the material that I was able to get, at least while I was starting the project here in Chicago, North America, the gaze is very colonial. It's coming from that kind of perspective. I was also able to access some archives here through the Library of Congress, and a lot of these are open access. And being able to access these publications, like for example, this specific one, the story of the banana, which was commissioned and published by United Fruit Company, which is Chiquita Banana. And so, you know, obviously it presents a very colonial gaze at not just the landscape, the fruit, the people, which I'm interrogating through some of these paper pieces. If you look closely, you'll be able to see that these are actual surgical sutures. So if you do a bit of digging, I don't think it takes a lot. You can very easily find these connections of United Fruit Company Banana Massacre and illegal funding for military groups and such, and these kinds of imperialist interventions into Central and South America. Thinking a lot about the body and what it thinks, you know, using the surgical suture and the connection between those two. And also obscuring how they write about the landscape, the people, the fruit. This one, this specific piece, he saw man corpses, women corpses, child corpses would be thrown into the sea like rejected bananas. And that specific passage is coming from 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I think in a way like is what started this whole thing. Not necessarily intentionally at the beginning, but I think that idea was planted in my brain so many years ago when I first read this book. I think, I don't know, I was probably like 15 or 16, 17. I'm not quite sure. Definitely in high school when I first read that the book, and I wasn't reading into it as in like, oh, this is actual landscape, this is actual history that, you know, is intertwined with these fantastical scenes and narration by Marquez. But yeah, it really struck me when obviously like almost over 10 years later, I was like, oh my God, this is the same thing that I'm exploring right now. And this is kind of my research table. Right now, I just put my laptop there for the sake of our meeting today. But I see this wall as or this installation, I should say, as a look into my brain or the craziness of my studio. Those of you who have been able to see my studio, you can agree how I'm a little bit all over the place. It might be messy to some, but I think everything has its place. And so a lot of the material that you're actually seeing on this wall, a lot of it has been transplanted over from my studio itself, right? Or, you know, from my online workstation where I have a mural board, and I just kind of have like this huge layout of different articles and different links and videos where I just kind of organize everything, and it's craziness. So I've just, you know, included things like stereographs. So these were available through the Library of Congress, publications, articles, contemporary articles, some other news articles from Colombia. So again, it started with the banana massacre in Cienega, Colombia, December 5th, 1928. So that's what I was initially researching in the National Archive, the Archivo Nacional de Bogotá, and the Archivo Nacional in San Jose. And then later I went to Santa Marta, where I got some really great material from the library there as well. So working with these, with archives, museums, public libraries that have a lot of this material, and you see some sketches and paintings and things that I did while I was on the land, and archival imagery from the archives, telegrams, to slowly unfold and tell this story. Again, the table has additional materials as well. Bananas, these are actually made out of paper, but they're based off a real banana, which I've casted. Thank you to Elliot for aiding me with that specific technical part of things. And then these are another example of the bananas. These are made out of plaster. And then there's two large panoramas. Here you see one. So this is inside the gallery. The other one is just outside of the space. It looks better from across the street. But this specific panorama, this was photographed in Limon, the province of Limon, Costa Rica. So this was initially the area that was set aside for banana plantations. There's a lot of farming that happens in this area. We started in the middle of the country in San Jose, went to Sarapiquí, where there's some tourism, but mostly it's agricultural industry and banana farming and pineapple farming, which is actually more detrimental to the environment now just because of how much land they need. And so, yeah, it was interesting just to see, you know, this waste, this destruction of the rainforest, or, you know, because bananas are not native. Surprisingly, they're not actually native to Central and South America. They're actually native to Asia. They were brought over. And regardless, you know, people can grow bananas in their backyard without having a detrimental impact to the environment. It's just the way that they're farmed in monocultures, and you know, the destruction of the land just for this. And they're clones, and so there's a lot of issues there. If there's disease, you know, very easily lose the crop. So lots of layers for sure. Peeling away at the layers that I feel like it will probably be a lifelong journey and exploration. And the other panorama It's just on the other side of this wall, but it is a bigger landscape photograph of this specific image of this specific port. So this is the contemporary port, because in Limon, the city, it was originally 100 years ago a port of entry and a port of exporting goods out of the country. But again, you know, you get to these beaches, you get to these places where locals are, and then you get to the beaches and locations that are more preserved for tourism, right? Costa Rica is very big on tourism. So you get these kinds of examples of whether that is gentrification, expulsion, like people unable to really enjoy their beaches and be part of this. And again, this is the larger panorama. This is right on Wabash. You can see the CTA right on Wabash. I had a colleague and friend who said that they could actually see the mural from the train. So it's pretty large. Again, it's best if you see it in person, but we're trying to get really good photography. So again, for those of you who are not in Chicago, we'll have a really nice photograph for you to get a sense of the space. And then there's a smaller image here. I think, if I remember this correctly, this is one of the very first images that I took as I entered the country. It was quite a journey to enter Costa Rica, but as we were driving, because San Jose, basically all the flights enter through, the majority of flights, I should say, enter through San Jose, and then you kind of go off to your own. Some people will fly off to like different resorts, whether that is in the north or, you know, the west of the country. But we were driving east, which is not as popular because of it's usually agriculture, but we were driving through these mountains and the scenes were just, so it was surreal. So that's just one of the very first photos that I took as I entered. So we're back at the beginning, but again, I'll be answering questions and walking through the space as well.
Giselle, you want me to start asking some questions and talking?
Yes, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the walkthrough. That was really great. I feel honored because I've been in the studio with you since last summer, seeing the work grow and change. And a lot of this I have not seen. I think maybe when we were in the studio last summer, I only really could see these paper. It's nice that you're right here. You were working on these paper sort of revealing, hiding, showing, not showing these scenes of the workers behind. And so maybe we could just start there. I have some questions about the your process of, and it'll overlap with the digital imagery that you're also, digital photography that you're also engaged in. This process that I'm seeing in common between a lot of the different types of work you're doing. Now, the actual question, revealing and not revealing, or like hiding and showing, like showing and, you know, these additive and subtractive kind of processes in collage and in digital, and now as you're showing us the physical. I don't know, what is it that you feel you're gaining or learning or showing in this process of like revealing, hiding, showing, taking away, adding something? Because I noticed that one of the other later images, like in this kind of work, there the image behind seems to maybe have been collaged out, and things have been out removed, I should say, like a reverse collage.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Luis. Yeah, so I think that this started a lot, like for me, I think of like process being very important. And I'm sure a lot of makers in the audience, or if you know people who are makers, artists, artisans, craftspeople, right? The process is so important. And so um, I think that just with the start of this piece, right, I was starting to learn how to make paper. I had made paper in the past, but I had never made paper from fiber. Like, you know, fiber as in like the banana leaves or like grass, etc. Um, and so, you know, I know this is kind of touching upon the exhibition at Stoveworks, but my initial thought was like, well, what kind of material am I able to access here in North America, in Chicago, Canada, wherever? Um, and, you know, I can access certain archives here, right? So the image of the agricultural worker in the back are archives that I was able to find here in North America. And then, again, going back to the process, right? Using banana leaves. This is something that is easier here in Chicago versus Canada. It's a little bit more complicated because it's not as the population of Latinos, Colombians is not that big. And so I'm able to access the banana leaves for making tamales at the grocery store. And so I started with that, right? Because that's like one connection to what I'm exploring. And I'm also talking about the process because, again, like this collage effect, right? These paper, like these cutouts, these slits. When I was making these, I was thinking about the ambiguity of what is recorded, right? Again, going back to the archive. We don't truly know, and going back to the banana massacre in Cienega, Colombia, 1928, we still don't fully know how many people were shot at and killed by the military. That this is not a number that is officially recorded. Like there's been multiple numbers, between 41 and 4,000. Some newspapers saying 200, 100. It's just not a real number. And I mean, does the number matter? Absolutely. Will we ever get that definite number? Probably not. Will we ever know truly what the cost of us having access to these products or being complicit in these kinds of companies that do this damage to the land and the people? How can that be quantified, right? It's so hard to determine. So I don't know, there's something very meditative, and like the process of just making the paper and of cutting out, right? Because I'm cutting these out with an X-Acto knife after I've made the paper, cutting those out. So yeah, I don't know, I think someone said something in the comments. I wasn't able to read it, but yeah, the number.
I can read you what they said. They said that the official US records are still currently redacted.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Like the
Yeah.
numbers.
And it's not about the numbers like you were saying.
Yeah.
It's about the whole sum effect of all of this, maybe. Okay, so you talked a little bit about the process of making the paper, but I guess I'm still lingering on the question about this hide and seek that you're playing, the revealing these additive versus subtractive processes of collage and image making. So in this one, it looks like you took out the like the background, you remove things from the scene.
Yes.
Can we
Yes,
talk
yes,
about
yes.
that? Like there's additive subtractive process in the paper. I'm reading them as tallies. I don't know. They're bodily. They do feel like little people and numbers and tallies you're recording with the slits. At the same time, they're letting us see through, but they don't really let us see through. And then we see now the image behind, right? Tell us about, I mean, why remove the
Yeah.
information? Why collage out stuff?
No, 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 no. Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of your initial question. Yeah, so in this one, and I can kind of lift this so that you all can see. Yeah, so it is removing, so it was these scenes, and you can see on the road for the market, right? And this was the publication that you saw on the walls. It was from one of those publications. I believe that this one was titled, again, commissioned by United Fruit Company, titled Treasures of the Tropics, right? They're claiming these treasures for themselves. And so, you know, they do have these photographs of workers, in various stages, right? This one is on the road to the market, and then the other one was of a worker, you know, carrying this, it's titled Backing the Bunch. Backing the Bunch. And so I've removed everything from the background because I wanted to just isolate the figure, the people who were, you know, the people who were doing all the heavy lifting, the back work, like this kind of labor, to support this industry, to support this imperialistic
When I have a question,
capitalist.
when people are engaging with this work, are they allowed to would you want them to kind of touch the paper, or is it more about them peeking behind and seeing what's there? Because you're just so obviously you own the work, so you're very you know, in charge, and you can say, hey, I'm gonna move this thing out of the
I'm
way.
gonna
But do you want us to, do you feel like we're supposed to do that too, or we're supposed to have more reverence for the banana paper?
Yeah, I mean, I would ideally, if you are going to touch it, to be a bit gentle with it. I think I'm not encouraging the general audience to come and lift the paper because I've seen how I don't know, it just really, but one solution so that people don't have this need to want to pull the paper up is this gap, right? So there is enough space in it. And I have been working through this piece several times where it was like closer and it was harder to see. And so I think I've resolved that in some way here so that if you're a viewer, the audience can come in and see. And you are able, you might have to, like here, I'm like kneeling down a little bit so that I can read, you know, what's on the paper. I know it's kind of hard via camera, but there is enough space so that the viewer is very easily able to see the figure, and even read the text, and you do see that the figure is isolated. That is something that I have done, right? I've removed, I'm going to move over to the other one. I've removed the background for a purpose. Yes.
Yeah, it is great. It's like a really strong gesture to separate the screen, or like, and then to get these shadows over the people, and it's so
Right.
nice. It's so nice. It's strong. That maybe leads me to another question about collage, and what I was really struck by were some of the Sienna type collages that there was like one that has text in it, and then there was another collage too, the digital collage. Um, and then that might just also bleed over into the question of like the whole installation as a collage, or the panorama too, the process of maybe stitching together those images for I think it might have been this one. Yeah, exactly. Um, or another one, you had the one that was like a defined leaf too, where you could read text inside of it. Yeah, I don't, tell me a little bit about what you think about digital collage, and how you went about making this big, huge panorama.
No, absolutely. So when I was in Costa Rica, I was able to do you know, I was traveling for over 2 months. And so for 2 weeks of the travels, I was at a residency to kind of debrief and unpack and just kind of sit with the work for a little bit, what I had shot at that point. And so I was at this artist residency. I had bought and brought all of these materials with me. I had paper, fabric, cyanotypes, you know, chemistry, stuff to make different sun prints, all kinds of things. lugging it around with like this huge suitcase. Oh my goodness, probably going crazy with all these things. But yeah, so I brought all these materials, and while I was there, this was in a remote part of Costa Rica, and they grew a lot of their own food, and they also had banana trees, right? They had chickens, and they had food compost, and they had a whole system set up for this. And I think that shows, yeah, you can have bananas in a more sustainable way, but also not trying to guilt or shame people for buying bananas or having people work in this business, right? You have to do what you have to do at the end of the day. But with these collages, I was making them with the leaves from the banana trees in this residency. And it was until a week after, when I went to the archives in San Jose, where I got these beautiful blueprints, and I was like, oh my god, this blue, this is a cyanotype, right? Like, how would you make reproductions of these? And so I just thought, yeah, what a great way to just use, right, the cyanotype of the leaf, and then create these layers with the blueprints, which were made by the United Fruit Company.
So just to clarify, sorry, the
Mhm.
blueprints, the actual term blueprint has
Mhm.
to do with the actual mode of making the blueprints, that they are
Yes.
cyanotypes.
Yes. That's crazy. And I didn't learn this until afterwards, when I was like, oh my God, put two and two together.
I feel like when you
Um,
told me that, I also didn't know that, and it all
I know.
clicked whenever you told me this months ago, right? But it's like, yeah,
Yes,
that's so materially authentic to the work, right? You talked about
absolutely.
me, and this is the only time I'm gonna talk about me, but the fact that I have done archival work too, and I'm always looking for these kind of moments when doing archival work, or any kind of work really, where the material shows you the material form, or
Mm-hmm.
the form really follows function. And
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, someone else that I know recently who's been doing cyanotypes too is talking about like a trendiness of cyanotypes. But
Mm-hmm.
this, I thought probably for like ecological reasons, or for
Yeah.
whatever good reasons that there might be to artistically explore cyanotypes in photography. But this is the first time that I'm seeing it be like authentic to the project, and like really connect with the material in a good way, so in a strong way, right? So thanks for spelling that out and reminding me too. I forgot about this part.
No, absolutely. And to be completely honest, I did not know about this connection until I was sitting in the archives and literally making this connection. Like, that's how crazy it is. And I think that sometimes in art making, when you have a happy accident like that happen, I'm spelling out all my secrets, but I don't know, it just happened to work out really well. I for whatever reason, I brought cyanotype, because it's fairly easy to make, and the facilities at this place were not necessarily like high tech photographic facilities, and so having something that's a very low tech, easy alternative process of photography like cyanotype would make sense, right? And like some of the really early cyanotypes too were used to make these prints of plants like seaweed and all these kinds of very delicate moss and very delicate leaves in order to record them.
So this
Uh,
gets into your training, because well, maybe we can just talk about that for a second. I mean, you are a trained photographer. Like the idea that someone's just gonna accidentally bring cyanotype material with them and lug it across the country isn't quite like, it's not that's not a novice level like move there.
right. No, yeah, and I mean, I have so many more. Like right now, you're only seeing three, right? There's this one, there's this cyanotype, like, and then there's these two. But I have a whole lot more cyanotype printed on fabric, so I had lots of these, and I'm also continuing to work on these because I've been thinking about doing intervention through embroidery, but that's still in the works. So I don't know. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, or maybe it doesn't. But yeah, just kind of like adding more right? Layering things, doing embroidery.
They're gorgeous, and I think that they really excel at the moments when you're collaging the content of the archive into like the maps and the words and even like this idea, this source material, the seed that was planted by Marquez. It makes it a poetic and an emotional response to this history. You know, the way that you're doing in an expert way with the banana paper. I think the sienna type, and then collaging that sienna type in a digital way back into digital from material, physical material into the digital is like is really nice. Can you talk about the um the panoramas? Just
Yes,
what's your
of
process for that?
course.
How are you making these big giant images and getting them on the wall?
Yeah, so getting them on the wall was a installation challenge.
Is it vinyl? Because
Um,
I'm just not there, so I'm assuming it's a
no, no,
vinyl.
no, absolutely. Let me just say, Phototech looks beautiful, but Phototech will drive you mad trying to install it, just because think of it as a huge photographic sticker. But the way that the image itself was made, right, just driving, we were driving. Oh, this is an interesting scene, or like, let's go into this area, let's try to take some photographs. And so what I would do, this is all shot on my digital camera, and just kind of the way I'm standing here. So I would shoot one image, move over, shoot another image, move over, shoot this image, shoot an image, shoot an image, shoot an image. I think it was like between 8 and 10 total images, right? So it is multiple shots, which I'm taking on my digital camera. And then I bring these into Photoshop and I do a photo merge where it like automates and like stitches together these images. And the evidence is very easy, right? Like if you look along
Mm-hmm.
the edge,
Yeah, it's nice. I like
I
that.
mean, yeah,
Thanks for that detail. I wouldn't get to see
you
this from far away, you know? So and no one might even no one would geek out on that little bit of that's great.
yeah,
So it's a composite image, and
yeah,
I imagine I just didn't know if you were using like an app for it or if it is just a composited separate photos or what you did. But great. Thanks for giving us the detail view and the process.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, your iPhone
Hmm.
or can do the same thing. This is just a little bit more
Yeah,
longer process, yeah. And that's the same
yeah.
for the
Again,
big
we're
one out in
highlighting
the
your
front.
for sure. I was just gonna say we're highlighting your technical process, a trained photographer and image maker. Um, can we go maybe to the video piece, the performance, and just talk a little bit about video and performance in your practice
Yes,
too? Because that's
yes,
how I knew
absolutely.
you first, I guess. Not really how I
Yes.
knew you first, maybe in a sense, but one of the first ways that I knew you. Um, can you talk about performance, your training and video work? I know that I mentioned earlier that that we knew each other in a programming context. I've screened your work and you've made previous video performance work about sort of interacting with your family histories of migration from Colombia to the US to Canada. And you've mentioned Canada throughout the talk now, so it might put in context for the viewers that don't know you, that have a very complicated kind of journey across the north across the hemisphere, right?
Hmm.
So, and then you have made previous work about that specifically, and it had a lot of performance, and it was video as the form. So, can you talk about just your training and this work and where you are now with video and performance?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. So yes, so originally, my parents are from Colombia, and they immigrated to the United States in the late 90s, 2000s. Um, there's like a back and forth, and then eventually to keep things a little bit less complicated, eventually we ended up in Toronto, Canada. My mom, my brother, and I, right? And so I've called Toronto home for quite a long time, and in my previous, before I came to Chicago, my degree was at OCAD University, and I was really, really interested in performance. I discovered performance through the incredible artist, Alexandra Giles. She's incredible and has been such an example throughout my life as an artist and researcher. And learning how to use your body and using your body to process trauma and to process pain and to process some very difficult and complicated histories, whether they're your own histories, whether they're bigger histories outside of yourself. That's just something that started to come very naturally to me as I started making art. And I guess one way of recording that is either through photography or through video. And so when I initially started to dig deeper into this larger history of the banana and to the companies that created these kinds of situations, I'll be honest, it was very overwhelming. It was a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. Like if you really sit with history and you put a face to people, it breaks your heart. At least it did for me. And so, right, what is one way of processing it, right? Like using your body to move through space and to move through these histories, because I just can't sit with all of these things in my mind and knowing all this history without putting it into action. And so this is actually performance number 4. I had been playing around with the idea of performance, and I decided to one day do a live performance for one of my critiques. I see that Noah's here. Noah was there during my first iteration of this body of work. He actually recorded it for me. So thank you, Noah. And thank you to everyone else who has been part of this whole journey in general. So I did a performance of this piece, and there was a really good response, because the way that I see it is, and I'm gonna just switch over to the map here, right? I just see that map started example of like who is made for, right? It was an example of a map that is trying to tell you these are the places that we've quote unquote have power over, like we've not necessarily colonized, but you know, they've bought land and they're building railroads and they're building systems and having plantations and exploiting people in order to export this elsewhere. And so in the video, I am tracing these specific passages, right? I'm going in and taking my time to trace every step. It's almost like, you know, following the path of the banana. And I'm not at that stage in this video just yet. But I end the performance with me going in and erasing all the countries that have had banana farming, banana plantations, you know, this imperialistic power over them through this company. And there, you know, it's not just Colombia, like Guatemala has very complicated history. Like if people know a little bit of history about Central and South America, in the US and that kind of power and military coups and whatnots. You know, I'm not a historian and I don't claim to be a historian. There's people who are so intelligent and have written books all about this. So while I'm not a historian, I am looking at these historical artifacts and these texts and this history and processing it as an artist, right? Processing that almost, I don't want to say migration of the banana, but like this movement of this plant. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I can say about this specific performance piece. Yeah, it's performance number 4, and I think I'm just going to continue doing them and just have different versions of them, whether they're recorded for camera. But I would really, really love to do another live performance, maybe in the near future, because it's really powerful and very, very heavy though, very heavy.
you're talking about catharsis essentially.
Hmm.
And it makes me wonder about the whole kind of obsession, the whole investigation, the whole reason, whether it's going back to Marquez or something else. Like,
Hmm.
why for you, with thinking about this as catharsis, why for you does it matter now for like artists to keep investigating these things and these histories? Like that for some people it might not be
Hmm.
obvious that it still matters or why it matters or why it's relevant.
Hmm.
You know, like, oh, okay, this happened so long ago. And what? Or it's still relevant to today, how and why, you know, but maybe not the big why,
Yes.
like on a personal level. Like why have you been so affected by or like obsessed with this topic?
Yeah, no, I love that word obsessive because it definitely has taken over certain aspects of my life for sure. Um, but yeah, I think that while the bridge, I like to call it a bridge because I feel like I need to start building this bridge, especially to recontextualize it to North American audiences in particular, is that there is so much more of a larger connection to this than people assume. Yes, I'm using this symbol of the banana, right? I like to call it even a symbol because it doesn't even feel about the banana anymore. It's really talking about power. Um, and I've always questioned like what would my life look like if I wasn't living here, right? If my family never migrated to America or immigrated to Canada, right? What would my life look like? Um, more contemporary ways, more contemporary history. Right, we have a very large population of Latin Central American people who are immigrating to North America, Canada, the U.S. Every year. And in a lot of ways, if you really dig deep into the history, you'll realize that it's the destabilization of a lot of these countries which have resulted in this mass migration. So while maybe it's like a domino effect, right? Like it's not like, oh, it was just this one factor of this one company and this one example of imperialist power that has destabilized certain areas, but it is one of the multiple other factors that contribute, right? So it's almost like, thinking like if America wasn't involved in Central South America, if, the US based companies weren't in, invested in like agricultural colonialism of Central and South America and other places as well, right? Like other South Asian countries, Africa also have this complicated history. Um, and so, yes, while it might be rooted in the past, this domino effect very much has implications in the future, present day as well. Um, and, I'm still working, I'll be honest, I'm still working of building that bridge and making it a little bit more evident. Um, but from the majority of folks who are from the South American, Latin American, Caribbean diaspora, they're very aware of this history, right? They might not know the whole narrative, but they know where it's coming from at least. There's also other people too in North America who are not from the diaspora who are aware of this, right? Um, but it's just interesting to that's a really great question too, because it has been asked. Um, and I'm still working on building that bridge, right? Because I can be very much on the nose about it, like this is what led to that. But I don't know if I necessarily want to do that. Um,
You're not teaching us necessarily something, but
yeah,
but there could be like a didactic somewhere that explained the
yeah,
history if you needed it to be. But I mean anyone can just, or you could just have like a reading list, right? Like here, read all
yeah.
these damn books about it. Eduardo Galeano, good start,
Right.
like you're
Yeah.
saying, you were mentioning Neruda and Marquez, right? People, there's plenty of literature out there,
Oh yeah.
and it's not your job to historicize these things. But I am still personally wondering about your
Hmm.
personal connection also to it. You did explain it in terms of like bridging this gap between American audience, North American, US American audiences. But is there something that like you feel is a connection between maybe specifically Costa Rica and Colombia, or is it just this empathizing with and like seeing your story and histories understood through and out of these things? Because it's not you're like you said, it's not, you're not spelling it out, it's on a map. So I'm
Mhm.
just wondering if there is something in your mind that you, other than you imagining yourself not having left, is there a literal connection between, for my own literal curiosity and
Mhm.
for the viewer, is there a connection between this material, the content, and the things that these banana republics have done in Costa Rica to Colombia? Is that where we're not, we just haven't said officially?
Yeah, no, I mean, so the choice of the location of Colombia and Costa Rica. So I initially started with so the agricultural industry in Colombia for banana is not as big as it is in Costa Rica. But I did start initially with the banana massacre that occurred in Colombia. Um, my family is not necessarily from Cienega at all. We're like Tolima, which is like in the middle of the country, but they were also agricultural workers in our ancestors. And so, yes, there's not necessarily that direct connection there, but it is something that has ripple effects throughout the whole country. So that was why Colombia was chosen as a location, but also Costa Rica is because it's a modern example of where the agriculture is today, right? So like a lot of these like the plantation photographs and like the bananas, like this one, for example, is the Chiquita bananas, one of their farms. They're very much active in Costa Rica today. So
So
that's
it's
to
like a
answer
part,
that.
it's like a point two. It's like
Yeah.
in Colombia there is this history of the Banana Republic, and
Hmm.
now like the point two, 3.0 like version of it is now
Yeah. It's Costa
the
Rica.
Costa Rica. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, so
Yeah.
that's all I was wondering, if we could just
Yeah.
timeline that out.
Yeah.
My
No,
brain
absolutely.
is very autistic. I need to see the one, two, three.
No. And you're totally fine. I mean, absolutely. Like, again, going to the map, like you can go to Guatemala, you can go to Honduras, and you can find like remnants of this, right? I had a really great artist talk. I forget where she lived. I think she either lived in, I don't know, I think it was Guatemala or Honduras. I'm not sure which country. But she said that a lot of these housing units for the agricultural workers are still there. When I went to Costa Rica, we were unable to find well, I mean, there's like neighborhoods that people live in, but like historically the housing that was really poor conditions are still standing where she was. Um, so you can go to any of these countries and still see evidence in the land of this history, right? And this is, I guess, going to this photo, not trying to jump around, but like if you look closely, this is just a road, and these are all banana trees that are just kind of taken over. And this is not a plantation or anything. This is just a random road, on the countryside, and these banana trees are just kind of growing all over the place, and you see this
I would
just
never have
happening.
thought of a banana tree as an invasive species in this way now, but it's
Right.
interesting now. Now, because
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew that the bananas came from another part of the world. I just assumed that
Yeah.
bananas are indigenous to the Americas, but they're not, which is
No.
truly
Yeah.
fascinating too. A similar history with like the pineapple in Hawaii
Hmm.
and how it was brought to Hawaii not from
Hmm.
indigenous to that land and forced upon the ecosystem through these imperial, and colonial processes. No, this is great. This is great to just kind of spell this stuff out. And again, not all people know this. I'm learning, you've learned, we're all learning through these processes. I wonder what time it is and if we have audience questions. It's already past 2, so we've been doing this
I know.
for an hour. Do anybody in the audience have questions? You can type them out, or and I can read them, or you can turn your mic on. Because we could just obviously Giselle and I could just talk all day because we're friends. Even it doesn't have to be a question, it can be an observation or uh an insight, some feeling that you've had a response to what we're talking about, learning, seeing. Somebody's saying they have a question, but they can't unmute themselves. Okay. Do you want to type it, or is that, can we unmute people?
I just enabled people to unmute themselves.
Okay, we just enabled it, so
Yeah.
you can speak now. That someone, Stephanie says,
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing your art with us, Giselle, and this has been so educational. Thomas says, thank you for documenting this history and sharing it through your lens. But did you want to ask your question? Back to Cindy, I think it was.
Yes, I just didn't want to interrupt you. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your work, and it was really nice meeting you. I'm not sure if you remember me, but I met you as you were finishing your setup. Um, I was wondering if there are any like large or small scale actions or solutions on decentralizing this fruit company and um, restoring the natural environments from like the all the nutrients taken from the soil, as well as the effects on the, like native flora and fauna and indigenous peoples. So I was wondering more if you like witnessed or are aware of any actions taken at a larger small scale, especially as us consumers, largely in North America, are the ones with the power, but also usually the ones with like the lack of knowledge as to where these origins are taking place and the effects it has on those people. I know that's like a loaded question, but you can take it as you will. Thank you.
No, Cindy, absolutely. And I do remember you. Oh my goodness. It was during the process, it was like the first day of the opening, and I was trying to steam all the tapestries, and poor Cindy was like looking, and I was like trying to steam everything. But I absolutely love your question. Thank you so much for asking it. Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I'm just kind of still trying to figure out myself. And I think that it would be great to like collaborate with other people who are way smarter in terms of this kind of agricultural, like how to restore the land, right? I don't have those specific answers, but I do know that as consumers ourselves, right, like we do have purchasing power. I think especially now with genocide that's happening in Palestine, and with all the boycott of certain products, I think that is something that we are able to do, and also demand for a better world, right? I think that a lot of these issues, and not just banana farming, but other larger issues as well, is because we're uneducated or complacent with the kind of things that are happening. So I think as consumers, we are able to make a difference in that way. There, I don't know. I think it's also kind of difficult for one individual to take on such a large corporation. I know that Chiquita Banana has sued other artists and creative people as well in the past for doing this. I'm like, they can try to sue me. I got no money, so good luck with that. But there is an instructor who was actually sued for a work that one of his students made. So I don't know. It's complicated, Cindy, and I apologize if I don't have a direct answer to this. I think that I'm still someone who is learning it and trying to think of ways to change this. I've also just been like cautious because there are real lives that are affected today, right? Like in Limon, there's a lot of agricultural workers that this is their livelihood. This is where they live. This is where, they're able to feed their kids, to feed their families. And so you know, on a human, like on human to human level, right? I would want those people to be able to do their jobs. Now there's things that could be done differently. For example, in pesticides, really negatively affecting the lives of those workers and their children, right? Because of the contamination. So would that look like better farming practices, right? Not using these harmful pesticides, not just in bananas, but any other kind of fruit or vegetables that we consume. And I think as consumers, that is something that we could potentially join together and demand for more ecological methods of farming, right? So I think that is possible, right? I'm not trying to tell people never eat a banana, shame on you, right? I can't, that's not it. I think it's so much larger and so much more complicated. So I don't know if I totally answered your question, Cindy, but thank you for asking it.
No, it's an important, super
Yes.
important question.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, really great question, because I think it also answers some other questions that I have about the work and it kind of being a conscious building work, right? It's not like an indicative as much as it is a way for us to build consciousness, yeah, through the practice. And maybe that goes back and answers my own question about like the why, you know, the obsession with it. It's like an all-encompassing kind of metaphor for connecting to like Cindy's question, right? The things that we all kind of might be wondering and wishing for a better world, that would take that into consideration as a default. Cindy's points. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Ricardo says, what was your favorite part or experience during your journey into creating this art for this project?
I am such a nerd. I think
No.
my most exciting part was going to the archives. I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know. There's just something so surreal about being able to handle a document, obviously, like with like proper procedures of handling these objects, right? Being able to handle this like hardcore evidence that someone took the time to preserve from over 100 years ago, or sometimes even longer than that. That was one of my most exciting parts. And like going to the archive in Bogota, and seeing like telegram after telegram that was sent by like official Colombian government people, and just recording like up to the specific massacre that unfortunately happened, right? It happened December 5th, and you have telegrams December, beginning of December, November, October, when this whole thing exploded. So like just being able to see the history play out live was really amazing. And putting that together, I mean, that's the part I enjoyed the most, because I was really looking forward to that specific ability to travel to these places and find these specific artifacts or evidence. And then one of my other favorite parts as well is just kind of building it all up, right? So you have the materials, you have the history. One of my favorite parts is to then just kind of see everything that you got and like trying to put it all together, if that makes sense. And then of course, like being able to travel to these places and like knowing that these are places where the land has a visible scar or has visible, you know, examples of like this human intervention was also very surreal. Just walking the same path and walking in the same land where this has happened was definitely one of like life-changing experiences as well too, to see that. I don't know, I'm such a nerd. That's one of my favorite parts about this whole investigation.
That's awesome. Any other questions, y'all? It's 2:10, so I'm wondering if maybe we wanna call it.
I think we're good. Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone. And again, thank you for those who are in the audience to coming here, and everyone else who's also supported this project and this investigation. Like, you know, we don't exist in a vacuum. We're influenced by so many people. So there's so many like mentors and like colleagues who've done so much. So I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Giselle, for the invitation to talk with you. Thanks to Dispatch Gallery for hosting us. I think we're just going to end the recording and say goodbye. That's it.
Thank you.